Welcome to the Life After Life Club. It's a beautiful June day. I'm really happy to see all of you, all of our constant people, and some new ones too. I'm thrilled. We hope now we've got good news that we're planning to meet in our clubhouse in September. But if it doesn't, we'll be on Zoom again, so that's okay. We'll just keep you guys posted on what we plan to do. So I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Preston Dennett. He has written so many books on UFOs, their encounters, his own experiences, as well as his experiences on the astral plane, both as a viewer and a participant. He's enthusiastic to share with us his out-of-body experiences. Without any further ado, I'm going to welcome Preston Dennett.
Thanks, Marion. Thanks to everyone who's joined us today. I'm so excited. This is a really important part of my life. I came into this field very skeptical. I didn't believe in UFOs, didn't believe in life after death, didn't believe really in anything. I would consider myself a materialist, but my life changed dramatically. I actually do a lot of UFO research, but started having out-of-body experiences as well. And I consider that one of the most exciting and valuable parts of my life. Completely changed my life. And I'm so excited to talk about my experiences with astral travel and out-of-body experiences. And let's just get right to it, because I've got this really exciting presentation. I've got some slides I want to share with you. So I'm just going to share screen. All right, so yeah, my presentation today is about astral travel. And before I get into it, I just want to give a little explanation on what an out-of-body experience is. We all, of course, live here in our physical body on Earth, but we actually do have an astral body. It's also known as the dream body. And there is life after death. I know this firsthand. The astral body is what I would consider the superior body. It doesn't age. It can do all kinds of things that we can't do here on the physical plane. And as I get into my presentation, you'll see what I mean. So let's just get going. How I got involved in astral travel was following the passing of my mother, Nancy, in 1984. She died of a heart attack suddenly at age 49.
Wow.
It was really devastating, of course. And I was just crushed. I was a very young man at the time. I was only 19 years old and didn't believe in life after death. But started to have experiences pretty close after she passed away. Here's me around that age. Yeah, that's back when I had hair. At the service for her, I saw her in the front seat of my father's car as he drove up. I saw her spirit. I did not believe in such things, assumed I had lost it. I must be hallucinating. But there she was in full living color. And as she got real close to me, she just kind of faded away. And now I realize I was seeing her spirit, but back then I didn't understand what was happening. And following that, I started having dreams where she would come into my room and I would wake up. She'd come into my room and say, "Everything's okay. I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Everything's okay." And then I would actually wake up. I was having what we now know as a false awakening. I thought I was awake. I thought I was actually seeing her spirit, but then I would wake up for real and realize it was a dream. But on some level, I knew it was her. I mean, I could just tell by the quality of her presence that I was being visited by my mother. So I experienced a real conflict. I couldn't understand. I knew that I was seeing her, and yet I was sure there was no such thing as life after death. And that got me interested in dreams. lucid dreaming, and that eventually led to exploring the topic of out-of-body experiences. And I found a book by a man by the name of Robert Monroe, who talked about his out-of-body experiences. I thought, wow, this is interesting. And I read the book. It was clearly sincere. It was quite compelling. And in the back of the book, he actually gave exercises on how to do astral travel. And although I was a little bit skeptical and honestly a little frightened, I thought, why not? Let's try this. And I won't get into the exercises, which are basically just meditations, visualizations, affirmations, this sort of thing. But I tried them, and I did it diligently for about a month or so, and it started working immediately. My dream recall increased dramatically. I went from having occasional dreams to many dreams per night, lucid dreams, and it wasn't long after that that I had my first out-of-body experience. And I can tell you, it was a shock. According to Robert Monroe, what happens is you'll feel a mild electrical sensation, sort of like an electric shock, and that will push you out of your body. It's called the vibratory state. And I lay down one afternoon and just closed my eyes, and suddenly my body started pulsing with electricity, and it was very strong. It wasn't mild at all. I thought, in fact, I had stuck my finger in the electric socket next to my bed and that I was being electrocuted, because I could feel waves and waves of energy pulsing through my body, and suddenly I popped out. Actually, that's the second one. The first one happened in the middle of the night. I woke up and I was standing next to my bed in the middle of the night. And I was very disoriented. And I finally came to full awareness, and I thought, what am I doing standing up next to my bed? And I looked down and I could see my body lying in bed. And I had a wave of mortal terror. I thought I had actually died. I was not happy. I was really upset. I thought, oh my God, what have I done? That was very scary that first time. And I immediately dived back into my body and felt a very strange sensation, like climbing into a suit or something. It's hard to describe. And suddenly I woke up and realized what had happened. I'm like, oh, I've done it. I've had my first out-of-body experience. And I was super excited. I thought, well, I'm going to keep trying this. And then it was just a short time later that I lay down one afternoon during the day and felt these electrical sensations, thought I was being electrocuted, and whoosh, popped out of my body. And I flew across my bedroom into the hallway, through the hallway into the restroom. And I was standing in front of the mirror in the restroom, and I grabbed the countertop. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I'm actually doing it. I'm out of body. I looked in the mirror. There was nobody there. I'm like, wow, I am out of my body. This is crazy. It works. This is real. In that instant, I knew that you could exist beyond the body. I knew there was life after death. All it takes is one real good experience, I think, to convince you. And I was immediately sort of pulled back across the hallway into my bedroom. I floated horizontally over my body and plopped back in and woke up. And I was hooked. I'm like, okay, I have got to try this again. If this is real, I want to know. My whole motivation for doing this was to find out if there was life after death, and to meet my mother and find out where she was. Was she okay? I really, really wanted to know. So that's how it all began for me. And I have to tell you, these illustrations are very much what it's like. It was a little bit disconcerting in the beginning, a little bit scary. But once I did it a couple of times, I had no more fear. By this time, I had read every single book I could find on out-of-body experiences. And I have to tell you, it's as safe as sleeping. I couldn't find any accounts of anyone who'd been hurt, locked out, possessed, gone too far away or anything like that. In fact, what I found was a lot of positive information and how it had helped people in an enormous number of ways, including physical healing. You can actually be healed as a result of an out-of-body experience, which I will get into a little bit later. But initially, the first time I did this, I'm like, all right, let's keep trying this. I doubled down on the exercises and worked real hard at this. I wanted to learn how to do this. And I would pop out and become super excited, so happy that I would get pulled back in. Strong emotion of any kind will pull you right back into your body. And the first, I'm going to say 50 times I popped out, I was only able to stay out for a matter of seconds. I would get so excited, I'd jump up and down and I'd yell with glee and get pulled right back in. And so it took me a while to like just take a few deep breaths, calm down. And by doing that, I was able to remain out of my body for a minute or two, and had to learn how to move. My first few times, I would just try to flap my arms and flail my limbs around until I learned that you have to actually use willpower and just sort of concentrate on moving to get yourself across the room. And I was still nervous. I was still a little bit nervous about what was happening to me. And I would just stay in the house and explore the house, walk through the bedrooms and things like this. Sometimes my vision wouldn't work very well. I had to learn how to see. And that was another thing that took me just sort of a trial and error period of relaxing and learning how to just calm down and use willpower. So the first, I'm going to say, few months, almost up to a year, they were very, very short experiences, limited to just inside my home. But eventually, I started to learn how to do more things. One of the greatest things about out-of-body experiences is you are floating. You can fly, and it is the most exhilarating experience you've ever had. Most people will have flying dreams. And in many cases, I've come to realize these are half-remembered out-of-body experiences. But when you're fully conscious out of body and you can fly, it is the greatest joy you have ever felt. And so that's what I started to do. I'd fly up, float through the ceiling, through the wall, up over my house, and just do circles around overhead. I, at the time, lived in Topanga in a rural area, but soon moved to the San Fernando Valley, to a condo in Canoga Park. And this is the San Fernando Valley here. And I would just spend, this usually happened to me in the early mornings. I would just feel the vibrations and then fly out of my body and fly around my condominium complex over the San Fernando Valley, over the freeways, a couple of 100 feet high, sometimes 1,000 feet high. So wonderful. I cannot express enough how wonderful it is to fly. And just, it's such a freeing, energetic, wonderful experience. And by this point, I was learning how to extend my experiences from just a few minutes to 5 or 10 minutes. And at some point, I would just be pulled automatically into my body. The trick is staying out. You don't have to worry about getting lost because you'll be pulled right back in if you even so much as think about your body. The real thing that's stopping people from doing this is fear and skepticism. People don't think they can do it. They think, oh, only an advanced yogi or something can do this. The truth is we all have out-of-body experiences every night. The trick is just remembering it. So as I got better at this, I just kept flying around and flying around and flying around. I'm wondering to myself, are these dreams? Could this all be dreams? I told my family what was happening. I have 5 brothers and sisters and my dad. And they thought I'd lost my rocker. I'm like, no, this is real. Here, read this book. None of them were really interested. Most of them were pretty skeptical of paranormal events. But my life was changing very quickly. Finally started walking through walls. That was something I actually didn't want to do at first because it was a little scary. And this illustration is kind of exactly what it's like. And I would experiment with it. And sometimes I would rush up to a wall and I'd bounce off of it. And other times I was able to slip right through. And what happens is I kept researching this and found out that sometimes your vibration is a little lower. You've got a lot of, you're attached to the earth plane. Other times your vibration is much higher and you can slide right through a wall very easily. So that's what I learned how to sort of control my vibratory level. And would walk through walls. It's the strangest feeling you've ever had. And I would always close my eyes when I did it because it was a little scary at first. But finally I'm like, you know what? I found a brick wall. I'm going to just walk through this with my eyes open. And I did. And you can see the insides of walls when you do it. It's really amazing. And it was scary the first time, but eventually I got used to it. And now it's no big deal. Another thing that made me nervous was, telephone wires. I'd be flying around the house and I'd see all these telephone wires and I'd always, fly under them or over them, around them. But I read other people's accounts and they're like, you can fly through them. What's really neat about astral travel is you are not physical. You cannot be hurt. You are not physical anymore. There is no pain. So eventually I just got up the courage and I flew right through the telephone wires. And there was a little electrical flash, sort of zit, zit sound. And I did it. It was amazing. And after that, I had no problem doing it. After 100 times, your courage starts to get stronger and stronger. And you start to do more and more experiments. And so after, several months, I'm like, all right, let's start exploring the physical world. And I would go farther and farther from my house. And one thing I wanted to try was to move physical objects. So I would set up a pencil on end or a pen and see if I could push it down or open a door or turn on a light switch or anything. And I couldn't. I was like a ghost. I was not able to move any physical objects. There are people who are really advanced at this, who have been able to move objects. I haven't. I still have not been able to do this. It's a matter of controlling your vibratory level and getting to a low enough vibration to match the physical world where you can actually move physical objects. I know people who've done it. I haven't been able to do it. But one thing that was really making me nervous was, am I dreaming? Am I losing my mind? Is this real? Because in the beginning, it is very dreamlike. There's a very close relationship between lucid dreaming and out-of-body experiences. And there's quite a bit of debate about what the difference between these two are. And in my own opinion, they're essentially the same thing. The only real lucid dreaming is when you become awake in the dream state. And if you're good at it, you can actually control the dream. But in fact, when you are lucid dreaming, and when you are dreaming for that matter, you are out of body. And the only difference between an out-of-body experience and a lucid dream is when you're lucid dreaming, you are essentially hallucinating. You're creating a reality from your own thoughts. What you're seeing around you isn't real in the sense that it's a shared reality. I mean, it's real enough, but it's your own reality. And an out-of-body experience is when you see the world as it is objectively real. But there's kind of a blurred sense of reality because in a way, reality itself is kind of a hallucination. It's a shared reality. It's a consensus reality. And it's very much kind of like a dream. And I was reading a lot of books on Tibetan Buddhism, and they said, life is a dream. And it never quite made sense to me until I started having out-of-body experiences. And I realized kind of what they're saying. It's very close to the same thing. So I think lucid dreaming and out-of-body experiences are sort of kissing cousins. They're very close to the same thing. But I wanted to find out if this was a dream or not. So what I finally did is I was out of body one day. This is my backyard, by the way, where I first learned how to do astral travel. And I can't tell you how many hours I spent just wandering these fields, flying around, having fun. And it is so, so beautiful when you're out of body. Your vision, if you're like nearsighted or farsighted, becomes perfect. And everything has an almost preternatural glow to it. It's extraordinarily beautiful. The colors are far more vivid. Everything kind of has a little glow about it. It's just beautiful and crisp and gorgeous in a way that's very hard to describe. And I spent many hours just walking, floating, and flying around this neighborhood here. And finally, I'm like, I need to find out if I'm dreaming or not, because I honestly wasn't sure. I kind of knew I wasn't. I mean, but I went to a location, actually in Canoga Park, after I'd moved to the San Fernando Valley. And back up here, I lived next to the LA River. And I was out of body once, flying over the river, far from my house. And I saw a little area of the river that was filled with soil and trash. And I thought, well, that's impossible. This is a cement river. There's no way there can be soil and grass growing on it. This is a cement river. And I saw, Pepsi cans and water bottles and trash. And I thought, you know what? I know exactly where this is. I've never been here before. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go back to my body. I'm going to drive here and see if it looks like what I'm looking at now. And that's exactly what I did. I flew back to my condo, to my bedroom, plopped back into my body, woke up, got my morning coffee, super excited, went to this location that I had visited out of body and got an incredible shock. It was almost exactly, there were a few tiny little variations, which sometimes happens, but it was definitely exactly what I saw out of body. I can't tell you how strange that is to see something first in an out-of-body state and then see it physically. I got chills all over my body. I'm like, wow, this is real. This is absolutely real. And so from that point on, I didn't need proof anymore. I knew what was happening to me was real. And often when I became lucid, when I woke up out of body, the very first time I had a lucid dream was in my backyard here. And often I would wake up right here. Even when I lived in Canoga Park, I would find myself out of body back in this field. This is a thing wherever you first have your first out of body experience, where you first have your first lucid dream, you will often be pulled right to that. And that's where you wake up. And that's your sort of starting point. So I started doing all kinds of exploring of the physical world. I would go to my friend's house, my family. They would never see me. I would float in front of them. I'd be like, I'm here. Can you see me? Can you see me? They never could. I know people who've been able to appear as apparitions and show themselves to other people. I initially was not successful at that. I finally was, which I'll explain a little later. But yeah, people could not see me. They just could not see me. It was very strange and somewhat disconcerting because, again, you feel like a ghost. But it's so much fun. I have a friend who lived down in San Diego. I thought, let's try to visit him. That's what I'll do. He lives, 150 miles away. And often when you're floating out of body, you're traveling, 5 or 10 miles per hour. You can go faster if you sort of command it, say faster, faster, faster. And you'll speed towards your destination. So I popped out of body one morning and I said, okay, let's go visit John in San Diego. And I sort of set that intention. And boom, I found myself flying over the freeway. And then it turned into just a blur. And I'll say teleported is the word I will use, because I didn't fly in the normal sense. I just suddenly found myself there, floating down into his apartment. And he didn't see me, unfortunately, but I floated around. I'm like, hi, John, hi, John. He did not see me. And I floated around some other people, and finally just went back. So it was really fun initially to explore the physical world, but you can only do that for so long because the astral body gets pulled automatically at some point to the other side. And really that happened early on, but I'm just going to sort of bounce around in time here and talk about a few of the other really cool experiences I had exploring the physical world. And one thing I wanted to do was visit Area 51 in Nevada. This is allegedly a place where we reverse engineer UFOs. I am a UFO researcher, so I was very interested in this sort of thing. And I had read this article in Fate magazine where they asked their readers to visit Area 51 using psychic impressions, remote viewing, or astral travel. And the article was amazing because a bunch of people responded. All women, by the way, not one man responded, not one man, but about 15 women responded with their psychic impressions of Area 51. And they described what we now know what's going on there, reverse engineering of ET craft, genetic experimentation, things like this. We've learned this from whistleblowers who work inside Area 51, who even said that there are ETs who are working among the human population on the lower levels. This base goes underground. Now, I don't know if that's true, but this is what the whistleblowers have said. And this is also what the readers from Fate magazine said. They basically confirmed everything that the whistleblowers are saying. They said that gray aliens are working there among with humans, that there's genetic experimentation, that there's reverse engineering of UFOs. Some of them who went out of body said that the ETs could actually perceive them and looked at them and were not happy that they were sort of visiting the lower levels of Area 51. So I thought, I'm going to try this. This sounds interesting. I'm going to try this. And one day I popped out of my body and I'm floating above my house and I'm just enjoying how beautiful it is when I remembered my plan. It's always good to have a plan when you pop out of body, because if you don't, you can slip right back into the dream state. And it's a very delicate state. It's kind of like, how would I describe it? Like riding a bicycle or walking a tightrope, playing a musical instrument. It's very delicate. You have to focus, focus, focus. And so I was there floating above my body thinking, what was it I wanted to do? I'm like, oh yeah, visit Area 51. Many people have a spirit guide that takes them by the hand and guides them through their experiences. I didn't have one that I could see. We all do, actually. And sometimes your spirit guide will remain invisible. They want you to learn on your own, but they are watching over you at all times. So that, just so you know, it's absolutely safe as sleeping. You're already doing this anyway, and we all have spirit guides that are watching over us. And I would eventually meet mine several times. We have multiple spirit guides, many great friends on the other side. And that they are the ones who sort of guide you from place to place. And so I set out the intention. I'm like, take me to Area 51. Now I go to Area 51. And my body started spiraling, and boom, I hit this sort of barrier and I teleported to Nevada. And I know how this must sound to anyone who's skeptical of this, but trust me, this is a real phenomena. There are many, many books on this. It's been proven in a laboratory setting, by the way. This is real. And if you don't believe me, try it yourself. You will see. At any rate, I suddenly popped out over Area 51, much lower than this picture here. I was coming down next to a hangar, and I was just breathless with excitement. I'm always so excited when I'm out of body. I'm like, I'm doing it. This is amazing. I can't believe this. If my friends could see me now, oh my gosh. I mean, this changes your life. It's like a whole new world. It is a whole new world. And I came in for a landing, and I'm standing there on the desert floor next to this large army hangar. And I'm like, wow, I am at Area 51. This is crazy. And I'm looking, it was much larger than I had sort of imagined it. And these hangars were pretty widely separated. There was miles and miles and miles. I've since learned how big Area 51 is. It is vast. It is 87% of Nevada is government owned. And I drove out to Area 51, and it took me hours. It would take you more than a day to drive around it. It is huge. And so I was looking at these hangars thinking, oh my gosh, I should probably start exploring now. Let's go inside. But then I thought, what if there's aliens there? Am I ready to see that? And I felt a little twinge of fear. And as if you were snapping your fingers, boom, I was back in my body. The least bit of fear will pull you right back. So I was a little disappointed. I didn't get to explore more. But I did later have a dream, which I feel was a half-remembered out-of-body experience. I know it was. You kind of learn how to differentiate between sort of your average dream and out-of-body experiences. Many dreams are half-remembered out-of-body experiences. They really are. If you feel like you visited somewhere, you met a deceased relative, you were just in another place, and you can just feel how vivid it was, that's often a real clue. And I came back from a very vivid experience like this, which I will call a dream, but I believe it was an out-of-body experience where I was exploring Area 51. My guide was there. There were some other people, and they took us to the lower levels. And I have to tell you, I didn't like it. It was somewhat, I won't call it an unpleasant experience, but it was certainly uncomfortable because the energy there was somewhat dense and negative. And it was a dark energy because I didn't like what was going on there. We were being taken from room to room. This was a vast underground complex. And finally, we came upon this one room where they were doing genetic experimentation. I saw a person there who was being used as a worker, and they were part of a genetic experiment. They looked deformed. This was a person, but was very hunchbacked. Their face was not normal. They were a failed genetic experiment, and they had spent their entire life down there as a worker doing menial duties. And I was extremely upset about it because I don't think people should be treated that way. And I think that's why it was difficult for me to remember. And it was a little bit traumatic. But I learned what's going on there, and I'm not happy about it. So you can go to France, you can go anywhere. Once, I read Robert Monroe, and his students had gone to the moon. I did that once. I popped out and there was the moon. I thought, let's try that. And I started flying towards the moon. It was taking a long time. I'm like, please hurry, because I knew I had only 5 minutes or so to get this done. It's still hard to stay out of body more than an hour or two for me. I've done it all night a few times, but generally speaking, no. I can only do it for maybe an hour or so. But I made it. Suddenly the moon started getting larger and larger and larger, and then boom, I came down for a landing. And I thought, wow, I am standing on the surface of the moon. No one will ever believe this. I don't tell people about this because it just sounds so wild. I'll tell you guys, but yeah, I made it to the moon. It was really, really cool. Another thing I wanted to explore was this so-called undersea base off the coast of Malibu. I had done a bunch of research into UFOs off the coast of the Santa Catalina Channel, and USOs, unidentified submersible objects. And I had put them all on a map, and I'm like, gosh, they're awfully clustered around Malibu. And I started getting other accounts of people who had been allegedly taken, not on board a UFO, but to what appeared to be an underground, undersea base. I had some accounts involving not just a couple of UFOs, but 10, 20, 30, 100 UFOs coming out of the water. I started to wonder if there was an undersea base there. And I put them all on the map. I'm like, gosh, well, if there is an undersea base, it's probably in the Malibu area. And it was sometime after that that other UFO researchers found this strange structure here. And I was really intrigued because this is exactly where I had sort of predicted there might be an undersea base. And thought, well, I'm going to put that on my list to explore astrally. And it took me years and years and years to do it. And relatively recently, a couple of years ago, I remembered. I'm like, oh, this is what I wanted to do. I'm like, let's go to the undersea base. And I live about, I'm going to say 20 miles away from there. So I set that intention. I'm like, take me to the undersea base. And suddenly I was flying, and I saw the ocean and I dived into the ocean. And wow, is that an amazing experience to be underwater. And when you're out of body, you don't need to breathe. You kind of feel like you are breathing, but you can go underwater and stay there a long time. It's a very strange sensation. And you can feel, by the way, you can feel the air, you can feel the water, you can feel temperature. It's somewhat muted, it's somewhat subtle. Like when you're walking through a wall, you can feel the material through your body. So I'm underwater and I'm like, wow, I thought there would be more fish. I was a little sad about that because there weren't a whole lot of fish down there. I saw some and I got closer and closer, and suddenly I was approaching this structure here. It was right about there. And it was very, very dark. This structure is like some 1,000 feet underwater and I could barely see. And I'm like, well, I'm not able to see. I'm trying to call forth light, and that didn't really work. But what I did see was a material that was clearly artificial. There's some controversy over whether this is a naturally formed structure or not. But what I saw was on the inside walls was sort of a jigsaw-like pattern, which kind of made it clear to me that this is probably artificial. I can't say for sure. This is just my own impressions. I also had a strong impression of ships, UFOs, being parked alongside in here. So that was my impression. And yeah, you can explore the physical world. You can go to France. You can visit your friends' homes. You can do all kinds of wonderful things. But at some point, you will be pulled over to the other side naturally, where we all go when we pass away. And in fact, that started to happen very early on. I didn't ask for it. This is just something that happens naturally, and that's what I want to get into now. You may have read about near-death experiences, and what often happens when someone has a near-death experience, say in the hospital or at a car accident, they'll float over the scene and suddenly a tunnel will appear and they'll be pulled through it. And yep, that's what often happens. I'll be flying around and then whoosh, I'm sucked into a tunnel. It's not always like that. Sometimes, well, now I've learned just to fly straight up really fast. And I hit what I will call the barrier between the worlds, the veil between the worlds. It's not necessarily a visible thing. It's just a sort of a vibratory level. It's hard to describe. Suddenly you just find yourself on the other side. And boom, you're there. But other times you'll be pulled through some sort of a glowing tunnel. Sometimes it'll look like a hallway or a corridor or a path. It can take all different kinds of forms, but often it's a glowing tunnel. It's really cool, by the way. And for me, sometimes it's a short, tiny little tunnel and you're kind of squeezing through it. And other times it's this vast, vast tunnel and you're a tiny, tiny little speck, like one of these little dots here. And again, it's absolutely gorgeous. It is so beautiful. Um, the beauty of going out of body is something I'm going to just keep talking about, because the light there is divine. Uh, I'm not a religious person, but you go on the other side and you know that God is real instantly. I've always believed in God, but you cannot go to the other side and not believe in source. I mean, you can call it what you want. All that is God, the source, but you will know, because it is all around you and within you. And it is a very, very wonderful sensation. And you cannot be in a bad mood on the other side. It's just not possible. Certainly not in what I would call the heavenly realms. But we'll get a little bit more into that. And often what happens is when I'm trying to get to the other side, this is what I see. It's very sort of cloudy, like flying over the atmosphere, but it's sort of the veil between the worlds. It's this weird kind of foggy area, which is, I don't know how to describe, but I certainly heard this from other out-of-body travelers. It's this area which is sort of between the physical world and the astral worlds. And by the way, there are many different levels to the astral planes. There's lower astral levels, higher astral levels. You have the physical body, the etheric body, the astral body, the mental body, the causal body, the Buddhic body. We actually have multiple bodies. It's not just the physical body and the astral body. We have a wide spectrum of vibratory levels that we're all attached to. And in fact, when we're astral projecting, that's sort of a misnomer, because the truth is, the astral realms are our true home. That's where we come from. That's where we came from. That's where we're going. And when we're in our physical body, we are actually projecting down here. So in a sense, we're all projecting right now down to the physical world. And astral projection is really more of a coming home. And that becomes really clear once you start doing this. So my whole goal was to meet my mom. I wanted to see my mom. Where is she? And I kept setting that intention. I'd pop out of my body and I'd be like, Mom, 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 where are you, Mom? And she wouldn't come. And it was really frustrating. Sometimes I would be out of body and she would come to me spontaneously. I'd be like, wow, here we are. And we'd hug. And it was the most wonderful thing. But I wanted to do it on my own. I wanted to meet her where she was. And I knew I could do it because I had been to the other side by this point, which I'll talk about some experiences I had on the other side. But first thing I want to get to is meeting my mother. And boy, was that amazing. What happened was I popped out of my body. I was in my bedroom and I walked out into the living room. And I'm like, yay, I did it again. I did it. I'm so amazed. I'm always so excited. And I thought, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And suddenly this lady appeared in my living room. It was this beautiful Black woman. And I looked at her and I recognized her, but I have no idea who she was. I just knew that I knew her. She was this young, attractive lady. And I'm like, wow, who are you? I know you, don't I? And she didn't speak. She just flashed me this wonderful smile, a very loving smile. And she grabbed my shoulders, spun me around, and pushed me through the wall. And I was startled by that. And I popped out in this other area. It looked like a cafe in France, honestly, is what it looked like. And I'm trying to orient myself. I'm like, where am I? Where am I? I don't know. And I started calling out for my mom. I'm like, Mom, 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 Mom. And she appeared. And I broke into tears. She looked younger than I do. By the way, I lost my hair when I was, 25, 30 years old. And all my hair comes back when I'm out of body. All my wrinkles go away. I look gorgeous. I look like a young man again. And I looked at my mom, and although I recognized her, I was amazed because she looked young. She looked younger than she does here. She had long, flowing brown hair when she was a teenager, and that's what she looked like. I'm like, Mom! And we ran up and hugged. And it's the best hug I've ever had in my life. Oh, I was so devastated by her death. It was the first thing I remembered each morning when I woke up. Last thing I remembered when I went to bed. I cried myself to sleep for a year. I'm not kidding. And I still get teary when I think about it because it was so hard. But I had this reunion, and it was the best reunion I've ever had in my life. And it still makes me emotional thinking about it. And I can't tell you how wonderful it is to meet your deceased loved ones on the other side. Nobody dies. It's a lie. There's no reason to fear death. It is the most wonderful healing experience. And she just smiled, and we hugged, and she was laughing at my reaction because I was so happy to see her. And we just hugged and hugged and hugged, and finally she like peeled me off of her so she could look at me and I could look at her. And she didn't speak. This was all telepathic. And she's basically gave me the impression like, I have some things to show you. And she manifested a car. And I'm like, wow. And we sat in the front seat, and she drove. And boom, we were zooming over to the other side. I'm laughing because I'm like, all right, if this is how we're going to do it. Because you can actually create things on the other side. It's really amazing. So she was kind of showing me this. This is something I learned how to do later. So she manifested this car. I sat in the driver or the passenger seat. She drove, and we popped over to the other side. It was this weird rocky realm. And then boom, the car disappeared, and we made it to what I would call the heavenly realms. And it was a field very much like this. But I Googled heavenly realms on the other side, heavenly realms. And all the images that were coming were not what I saw. So finally, I just started searching and searching for stuff that looked familiar to me. And this is close. This is very close to what the other side looks like. I cannot express to you how green the green is, how colorful the flowers are, how absolutely gorgeous it is. The air itself sparkles. Everything there glows with an inner light. It's made of light. There are no shadows. I have never seen a shadow on the other side. I've never seen any form of darkness. It is bright and beautiful, and the colors there have a level and a depth that's really impossible to describe. The closest thing I could find were these images of Japanese gardens to what the other side looks like. There's these little pathways, there's benches, there's streams. It is gorgeous. The air itself hugs you. It's like a bright summer morning, as if suddenly everything negative is gone. I don't know how to describe it, but you weep for joy, and it just embraces you. It is heavenly. That is the only way I can describe it. It is very much like I think people would consider heaven to be. Absolutely beautiful. And my mom is just showing me this. We're flying over this field, and we come to a little stream, and we land next to it. And she's like, isn't this pretty? I'm like, oh my gosh, it sure is. And she climbs into the stream and says, come into the water. And I was a little nervous because, I didn't want to get wet. And she's like, no, it's okay. And so we walk into the stream, and it's different from water here. It's very silky, very cool, really just slightly different, but also the same. And she reaches down and she takes a piece of algae and she throws it into my face, laughingly, playfully. And I'm like, Mom, what are you doing? And she starts throwing more algae at me. So I'm like, all right, it's on. And we had this little water fight, so to speak. And we're just laughing and just rolling and having fun. And finally, she floats up and gets out of the river, and boom, you're clean. You're dry. The water just rolls right off of you. And you don't get wet. It's very strange. You can go into the water and out, and you're dry again. I've done this a number of times. Sometimes when I'm, a little tired of the physical world, what I'll do is I'll just go to the other side and I'll take an astral bath, and I'll just relax in the water. It feels so, so good. I cannot tell you how rejuvenating it is. People say, oh, don't you get tired, staying up and going to the other side? I'm like, no, you don't. You come back and you can walk on air. You have so much more energy. It's extremely healing. And my mother's like amazed. She's like, she's just enjoying my own amazement, I should say. My mouth is wide open. My eyes are wide. I am giggling. I am just out of control with excitement. And she's like, you haven't seen anything yet. Just wait. And she says, grabs me by the hand and says, hold on. And we're going to go up a level. I'm like, oh, okay. And suddenly we fly, and we pop out into another realm. And it's very hard to describe what it's like. This is another view of very close to what heaven is like. The only difference that I can say from these images is that everything is actually glowing, and it's much more vibrant. The colors, oh my God, the colors. Oh, you're gonna love it. The other side. But so we pop out on another realm, and it's this wide, vast crystal plane of quartz crystals, sort of rose quartz perhaps, but largely sort of just quartz, very much like this. This is an image from a giant crystal cave. But this was not a cave she took me to. This was a long, flat-ish plain. There were mountains in the distance, but it was all quartz. It was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen in my life. Giant pieces of quartz. She was sitting on this giant piece of quartz, perched there. She has very good posture. And I am just floating there thinking, wow, I have never seen anything this beautiful in my life. And it went on for miles. Tiny little crystal sands to big crystal rocks to giant crystal mountains. And I'm just looking around me in awe when I realized that my vision was different. Normally when we look in front of us only. But on the other side, certainly on these higher dimensions, your vision changes. It's not only much sharper, but you can see 360 degrees all at once, which was really disorienting to me at first because I'd never, ever experienced anything like that. But I did that time. That was the first time. And I was just tripping out on my vision. And I looked way off into the distance, and suddenly I zoomed forward and I could see it in great detail. So you can also zoom in on objects on the other side. And your vision is absolutely perfect. All your senses are heightened. Sense of touch, the sense of taste, your vision, all of it. Smell. Yes, you can smell on the other side. The flowers. Oh my goodness. It is fantastic. So I am just enjoying the beautiful sight of all this. When my mom gets my attention, she waves at me and says, look, I want you to look at the ground here in front of you. And she points to the ground and turns it orange, bright orange. I'm like, wow, that's a neat trick. And it was the most orange I've ever seen. And then she says, eat it. She motions me to put it in my mouth. I'm like, what? Scoop it up, put it in your mouth. I'm like, okay. And I reach down and I scoop up these orange quartz. It was like sand. And I put it in my mouth. And you may have heard of the candy called Pop Rocks, where you put this candy in your mouth and it kind of fizzles and pops. Well, that's what it was like. It was like Pop Rocks. This orange crystal started popping in my mouth and fizzling and making all this motion. And boy, did it taste orange. I have never tasted anything so orange in my life. It was, like orange juice, like orange candy, but about 10, 100 times better. I've since addicted to orange juice. In fact, that morning, that was the first thing I ran to, was getting a glass of orange juice. But boy, oh boy, I tasted this orange stuff and it was so orange. And she's just laughing and laughing at my expression, because this was just wild to me. She's giving me a tour of the heavenly realms. And I was beside myself with ecstasy. I was just so happy to see her. And here she is taking me on this grand adventure. And she says, okay, we have to go back now to the heavenly realms. So I'm like, okay, let's go back. And she takes me to here, and we sit down on a little bench and we just talk for a little while, chit chat. I don't remember some of it. It's quite difficult sometimes to remember. And what I ended up doing was creating a dream journal, not only physically, but astrally. I have an astral dream journal. And while I'm there, I start writing stuff down in my astral dream journal book. So when I wake up, I can immediately write down what happened, because it can slip away very quickly like a dream. And we're just sitting there on this bench, and there are other people there. Everyone's very kind. Everyone's absolutely wonderful. You can't lie on the other side, by the way. Not in the heavenly realms, you can't. Everyone's telepathic, and it is so nice. And we're just talking and talking, and she's like, you have to go. And I'm like, do I? do I really connect? And I knew I did. I mean, I wanted to stay, but I knew I had to go. I still have a life to lead. I'm a very young man. I'm still in my early 20s at this point, mid 20s, I think. And she's like, yeah, you have to go. I'm like, okay, but it's sure been nice meeting you. I'll see you again. She's like, yeah, of course. And she like points to the sky. And I look up at the sky, and I've never seen the sun on the astral planes. It's just this beautiful blue sky with fluffy clouds, or it's just this kind of white arch overhead. I've never seen stars or anything like, well, I mean, I have on a few times actually, but I'll get to that. But normally, yeah, it's just this gorgeous place. And she points to these fluffy white clouds, and she spells out in clouds, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. And I'm like, oh, I love you too. And we hug, and suddenly this giant tunnel appears next to me. I'm like, oh no. And she's like, oh yeah. And I'm like, bye, because it's sucking me in. I can feel the pressure, and it pulls me in, and I'm sucked into this tunnel. And it took a while to get back, and I'm popping down, and I'd suddenly wake up in that cloudy place, and I wrote down what was happening in my astral journal, and I had to go down several levels. So I'm thinking the astral realms, or the heavenly realms, are one of the higher of the astral planes, which is true, as I'll get to in a bit. But popped up, I woke up. Actually, I kept waking up. I'm like, oh, I'm not there yet. And I wrote down what happened. And finally, I woke up and like looking around in my bedroom. I'm like, is this real? Yeah, it's real. And I'm crying. And I quickly wrote down what happened, called up my brother and my sister-in-law, who were helping me through this. I eventually taught them to have out-of-body experiences, and they've both done it successfully. And we went out for breakfast that morning. I ordered orange juice, of course, and I told them what happened. And that was still one of the best out-of-body experiences I've ever had. But following that, I visited her regularly. I would pop out there, and there'd she be, and we'd talk, and we'd have fun. And normally we just hung out here on this astral plane, but sometimes she'd take me to higher realms. But usually not. We would just hang out here and talk. And there would be other family members there as well, which is very interesting and something I'll get into a little bit. Because I'd be like, oh my gosh, there's my brothers and sisters. They're here too. And they're fully conscious. They're totally aware. I'm like, wow, we all visit the astral planes every night, is what I learned. So the real trick again is remembering. I had a dog named Maxine. I couldn't find a picture of her. My sister has all the pictures, and I didn't have time to get it. But Maxine passed away. She was our first real pet, and I was devastated. Our parents took her to the pound without letting us know. She was quite elderly and was put to sleep, and I was really sad, but had an out-of-body experience. And who do I meet? Was not my mother, but Maxine. And this was in that sort of cloudy realm. And Maxine comes running up to me. She's a very reserved dog. She does not lick you. If you ask her several times to give you her paw, she will, but she only does it on special occasions. Well, she came running up to me, licked me on the face, and gave me her paw. I'm like, Maxine. And we hugged, and she looked wonderful. She looked young again, and she was jumping around and laughing, or you know what I mean, like smiling as a dog does, and just having a good time. And it was a wonderful reunion. We've since had a number of pets, and I've met our other dog, Clyde, and our other pets. It's so wonderful. And often what I just do is go to the other side to play with our pets. And I met Maxine many times. And the most extraordinary time was I came and popped over to the other side, and there she was, and she comes running up to me, and she says, "Hi, Preston." And that blew me over. She talked in English to me. And I'd never heard of that. I did not know that this was even possible. And I thought I was losing my mind until I continued doing research and reading other people's accounts and found other accounts of people who have reported this. And that your pets actually do get the ability to talk to a limited extent, like a child, like a toddler on the other side. So that is so cool and really quite strange, but so much fun. And I do want to talk a little bit about what happens when you pop out of body. The astral body is also known as the desire body or the emotional body. And we're very emotional beings, and emotion actually comes from the astral body. The astral plane is the emotional plane. And you can go higher to the mental plane and the causal plane and the spiritual plane. There's different levels to our minds. And when you pop out of body, for a lot of people, there's a very strong emotional reaction. For many people, there's a fear reaction. And I had that the first time, but I got over that after the first time, and I had a very strong joy response. I was so excited I'd be pulled immediately back in. And I can't stress enough how strong emotion is on the other side, how strong thought is. It rules. So if you think something, it will appear. And I am not an angry person. I don't lose my temper very easily. But when you pop out on the other side, all your suppressed emotions, anything you haven't worked through, you work through immediately on the other side. And I don't have any eating disorders, but suddenly I'd just be overcome with appetite, the desire to eat. And I would create feasts of food. And I gorge myself on my favorite foods: brownies, chicken fingers, Neapolitan ice cream, sour cream, and onion potato chips. Those were my go-to. I'd create a table and I'd fill it with my food, and I would just gorge on food. And it was so much fun, actually. And I did it over and over again until I kind of got over it. And I don't have to do that anymore. But that kept happening. And it would sort of prevent me from getting to the heavenly realms until I got through these really strong emotional reactions. And another was anger. I would find myself often in a grocery store. And this is a weird thing. And I found out that this is actually quite common. People will pop out of body and into a grocery store. I've read this over and over again from other astral travelers who find themselves in grocery stores. This is a thing. And I think it's because there's a strong energy around food, or perhaps it's connected to the emotional body and the desire body. So that's often where I'd eat food, but I'd also just go crazy and I'd start like knocking things over and destroying the place. And I just had a very strong desire to just go berserk. And I'm not sure why, but I had to get over that. So yeah, you can actually taste food on the other side. And I don't want to get into sex too much because it's somewhat embarrassing and personal. But everything you can do on the physical planes, you can do on the other side. And you will create your desires and fulfill them. Robert Monroe talks about this. All the astral travelers talk about this. There's a very strong sexual energy on the other side. And let me just say, it's even better on the other side than it is here. And I'll leave it at that. I go into more detail in my book. But I just don't really, I feel a little embarrassed getting too into it here. But if anyone has any questions later, I can certainly talk a little bit more about it. But what I want to talk about is what it's like meeting people on the other side. Because often you can meet your deceased loved ones, and that's really cool. But you also meet people who are alive, your family. Here's my brother, Steven. And I popped out on the other side. I'm like, Steven, you're here. He's like, yeah, I am. I'm like, we're on the astral planes, right? He's like, yep, I know. We're in that in-between place. I'm like, you do? Because he was skeptical. He thought I was crazy. I would tell him I'm going out of body. He's like, prove it. And I'm not interested in proving this to other people. It's up to each person to prove this to themselves. And, but I kind of wanted to prove it to him. I'm like, well, Steven, we're on the astral planes, right? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, well, will you remember this? And he said, no. I'm like, what do you mean you won't remember this? He says, I'm not able to remember this. I'm like, well, I'm confused. You're on the other side, but you can't remember? He's like, yeah. I'm like, well, why don't you just remember it? He says, I can't. I'm like, well, try. He says, I'm not able to do it. And I started to get a little angry. I'm like, well, can you please try? And he says, I told you I can't. And we started to get into a little bit of a shouting match. I'm like, just try. And he says, I told you I can't. And I'm like, well, you're going to try this time. Please just try. And he says, I can't do it. And I woke up that morning. I called him up. And I'm like, Steven, did you have any dreams last night? And he's like, no, I didn't. I'm like, you don't remember anything? He's like, no, I don't. I'm like, oh, shoot. And this keeps happening. Here's my sister, Victoria. She's just a year older than me. We were raised as twins. We shared a bed throughout our, when we were little kids. We were inseparable. We grew up like twins. Often had telepathy together. We were close. And I popped out on the other side, and there's Victoria. I'm like, Victoria, we're on their astral planes. You know that, right? I'm out of body, and so are you. And she's like, yeah, I know. And I had the same conversation. I'm like, are you going to remember this? She says, I don't think I will. And I'm like, well, how about I help you? She says, okay. And I created a UFO. By this point, I had learned how to sort of project images outwards. You can create a house, you can create a garden, you can create a image of a person. You can always tell the difference between a projection and a real person, because a real person has a sense of presence about them, a consciousness, and a brightness in their eyes. So I created a UFO, and I did a good job. It was this gorgeous flying saucer with colored lights. It was bright silver, like a mirror. It was just this amazing UFO. And she says, wow, look at that. I'm like, you think you'll remember that? And she says, I might. And I'm like, okay, that should be good enough. And we went back to the physical world, and I called her up, and she had no memory of it. No memory. So it's quite frustrating, and I've done this a number of times unsuccessfully. The most success I have is with my sister-in-law, Christy, and she remembered a dream that night in which I was in it, but she didn't actually have the memory of an out-of-body experience. But I did have success later. I had interviewed a contactee who was very psychic. She's a medium. She has the ability of astral travel. And so I went over to her house. She lives in Florida. And I'm looking for her. I'm like, Dolly, where are you? And I came into her garage, and there was a man there. I'm like, oh, who's this man? He's sitting on a lawn chair. And I walked up to him. I'm like, hi, what's your name? He says, I'm Henry. I'm like, oh. And then my friend Dolly appeared, and she whirled around and she looked at me. And she says, I can't talk. I'm with Rob. And I'm like, oh, okay. And she looked beautiful. She's in her 60s. She looked a little bit younger. She kind of glows with this energy, but she was physical. I was looking at her. I was in the astral. She was physical. And I went back to my body, and I called her up. I'm like, hi, Dolly. How you doing? Did anything unusual happen, this morning? And she's like, I saw you. I'm like, you did? She's like, of course I did. You came and visited me astrally, didn't you? I'm like, yeah, I did. And she says, I'm sorry I couldn't talk. I was on the phone with Rob. I'm like, I know. You told me. So I got confirmation. And she actually saw me. And I said, do you know there's a man in your garage? She says, there is. I'm like, yeah, there was this man. And she says, what's his name? And I said, Henry. And she said, did you ask his name? Do you know who he is? What did he look like? And I said, his name's Henry. He's an elderly guy, kind of portly. And he was sitting on a lawn chair. And she's like, darn it, this guy won't leave me alone. He's haunting my house. He's been following me around. This was a friend of hers who passed away, who kind of fell in love with her and is now watching over her. And she's like, I don't know why he won't leave. I'm like, yeah, well, he is hanging out at your house. Then one day I'm in bed, and suddenly a bright light appears in my bedroom. It's so bright it wakes me up. And there's Dolly. She's in full living color, glowing with this absolutely divine, precious golden light. She's grinning from ear to ear and smiling at me. I'm like, Dolly, it's you. Oh my gosh. And she's like, I'm just saying hi. And she popped off and went away. And since then, we've been going on astral adventures together. It's awesome. She took me out of body, and we visited the Kuiper belt. There's an asteroid belt surrounding our solar system. And she took me out there. She's better at this than I am and able to maneuver around quite easily. And she showed me the asteroid field. Most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And she's able to take me into all kinds of different areas. But I've got to move on because I don't want to run out of time. One time I popped out at the other side, and I saw a family friend by the name of Rex. Here's me standing to the night, right next to Rex, and here's Rex. Here's us on a camping trip. And one day I'm out of body, and I pop out on the other side, and there's Rex. I'm like, Rex, oh my gosh, what the heck are you doing here? And he just kind of smiled and grinned at me. He looked a little disoriented. He was glowing so bright. He's a black man. He looked, white light was coming off of him. And he looked so good. He looked much younger. I'm like, Rex, you look great. And he still seemed a bit disoriented. I'm like, what are you doing here? And he didn't really answer me. but we just kind of looked at each other for a little while, and that's all I really remember. I lost consciousness and woke up. And I thought, well, do I call him? Do I call him? You know, he's not my friend. He's my dad's friend. I know him, but I'm not sure I want to tell him I saw him on the astral planes. And then we got a call from Rex's family. He had had a stroke and was in the hospital. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So I think he probably had a near-death experience. He does not remember having one. He has no memory of seeing me. I kind of didn't ask him outright, but asked if anything happened. Do you remember anything? He doesn't. But yeah, I saw him on the other side, and I think it was a result of him having a stroke. But since then, I have lost other people, and I have been able to see them. And one was my friend Roger. Roger was my best friend. He's just a few years older than me. And unfortunately, he became addicted to alcohol and was not able to shake this addiction. He caught the disease of alcoholism and could not shake it, and actually passed away from it. Very, very sad. He was in his late 40s when he passed away. And it was devastating, of course, for his family and for me. He was my best friend. And it was about 2 weeks after he died that I popped out of body spontaneously. Sometimes what happens is I will just wake up out of body in the middle of the night. Sometimes I lay down and I do it consciously and sort of induce the vibrations and pop out. But this time I just woke up, and I am not in the heavenly realms. I am in the lower realms. And this is when I started to learn more about what the astral planes are sort of constructed. We have the physical plane, and immediately next to us is the physical world, which is actually sort of a duplicate of the physical world. It's a sort of lower astral plane, but vibrating very much at the level of Earth. But immediately beyond that are what I would call the hellish realms. And Roger was in this pitch dark blackness, and he was screaming. He was not a happy camper. He was very upset, and he was just in agony. And he says, I'm not ready. I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm not ready to go. And I rushed up to him and I hugged him. I'm like, hi, Roger. It's me. You're gonna be fine. You will be fine. I promise you. You will be fine. And I hugged him, and I told him he's gonna be just fine. And I came back. I was crying because I thought he would just immediately make it to the heavenly realms, but he didn't. And so I was really upset. And I sat down and I prayed for him. I prayed like I've never prayed before, and did that regularly. And I told everyone else to pray for Roger because I think he might need it. And it was maybe a month or two later that I saw him again, and he was on a higher realm. He was not in darkness anymore, but he was not in the heavenly realms yet. This was a lower astral plane, which is very much like Earth, but there are shadows. It's the astral planes are pretty much like Earth. They really are. The lower realms have a lot more sort of urban areas, streets and cars and buildings, whereas the higher realms are very much more nature, and the buildings are much more beautiful and glowing with light. But where he was, it was just kind of like a bad day on Earth. And I saw him, and I came rushing up to him, and there was a barrier between us. And this sometimes happens. There are weird barriers between dimensions, and often you'll find yourself going through hallways and corridors and tunnels and being blocked by fences or walls or barriers. And I came up to this sort of wall, and I couldn't get past it to him. I think I was on a slightly higher realm than he was, and he was on a lower realm that I couldn't get to. And I'm like, Roger, Roger, Roger. And he says, Preston, telepathically. He says, I want to thank you for all the love bombs. I want to thank you so much. I love you. And I said, I love you too. And it was the first time someone actually spoke verbally in my head with words. Often it's just very telepathic and you get impressions, not English words. And he spoke absolutely clearly and just thanked me profusely. And I really wanted to hug him and touch him and, hold his face, but I couldn't. And suddenly this car appears and there's another person in it and he tries to run me over. It was a hostile entity of some kind. And I flew up and landed back down, and I'm trying to get back to Roger, and this guy's attacking me and following me. And I kept evading him and running away and trying to get back to Roger, but this was consuming all my effort. And finally, I'm like, all right, that's it. This is not working. I'm getting a little bit nervous about whoever is coming after me. And I just went back to my body and woke up. But I was happy to see that Roger was in a better place. And it was several months after that that I saw him again. And this time he was, I was led by a spirit guide to Roger. I said, take me to Roger, take me to Roger. And he was very close to the heavenly realms, kind of right next to it in what I would call a hospital. And I could tell it was the heavenly realms because of the colors. But he was unconscious, he was sleeping, and I didn't get to talk to him. But I was told that he's doing fine, that he's going to be just fine, and that everything's okay. And since then, I've seen him one more time, and he was in the heavenly realms. So I'm super happy. I still haven't gotten to visit him and talk to him like, I've done with my mother, who takes me on tours and stuff. So I'm still working on that because I have a long bucket list of things I'd like to do when I get on the astral planes, and other people I want to meet. But now that I know Roger is fine, I'm happy. And so don't worry. People will be taken to the other side, even if they're addicted. Suicide victims as well. They are cared for. Everyone is cared for. And proof of that is what happened to my brother, Jamie, who also died of alcoholism. This is my eldest brother, Jamie, who, was a nice enough guy, but didn't get along that well with a lot of the siblings. People loved him, don't get me wrong, but us siblings, we butted heads. I had a really good relationship with him, but he wasn't a super generous man. And I'm not going to say anything bad about him because he's a lovely human being, super smart. I mean, he was in the 99.9 percentile in mathematics, super psychic. He had out-of-body experiences. He had psychic impressions, but was kind of uncomfortable with it and didn't like to talk about it. But at any rate, he passed away, and I couldn't find him. I kept trying to find him, and finally, I did find him. He was on one of the lower astral realms, and I was brought up to him, and there was a barrier. This time it was a big window, and he was marched up to me by one of his helpers, and he looked kind of glum and sad and a little ashamed, perhaps. And he looked up at me, and I'm like, hi, Jamie. Hi, how are you doing? He's like, I'm all right. Telepathically, in an impression-wise. He didn't use words. But my impression was he was in rehab. He was going through school. He was kind of learning how his actions had hurt others. And you may have heard about the near-death experience where you have a life review. And everything that you do, every feeling you impress on another person, you feel it. So if you are a generous, loving person, you will feel all the wonderful joy that you've given to others. But if you hurt them, you will feel that too. And this is called the life review. And this is something you don't have to wait to do to go to the other side. You can just meditate and work through all your emotions, all your suppressed emotions. Realize your fears, realize your desires, and you will have a much easier time. And I think he was having a little bit of a hard time on the other side, but I finally did get to see where he's at, and he's good. He's in a good place. He's not quite to the highest heavenly realms, but I think he'll get there. Most people will not have a problem. The people who have problems are people who are very negative, entrenched in negative emotions, people who have not, who might be addicted, people who have criminal behavior, this sort of thing. And I became curious about it. I'm like, is there, are there negative entities? Oops. But I'll get more into that later. One experiment I wanted to do was say my own name in the dream state while out of body, because there was quite a bit of controversy about this. People said you cannot say your name in a lucid dream. It will pull you right out of it. You cannot say your name when you're out of body. I'm like, well, that can't possibly be true. So I finally remembered to do it. And I'm like, my name is, and I said my name. And nothing happened. I'm like, well, that's strange, because people talk about extraordinary things happening. And so I did it a few times. And once I said my name, I am Preston Dennett. And suddenly I was pulled to this fireworks display, and there were skyrockets going everywhere. And it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And it was earth-shaking. The whole world around me rattled. So that was cool. And there's all kinds of experiments you can do on the other side. But one thing I wanted to find out is there a hell? Are there lower realms? Is the Christian view of hell a valid thing? And I'm just going to say in one word, yes, but it's self-created. This is something people are responsible for. You are your own worst judge. And I was nervous about this because I'm a sensitive person, and doing astral travel makes you even more sensitive. But I wanted to see, I wanted to know. And other astral travelers had been to the lower realms. And yes, you can create anything, all the way from lakes of fire, so to speak, to whatever you want. And the first times I did it was just very quick, and I would find people and they would not look at you. They would ignore you. You try to get their attention and you cannot get their attention. There's a lot of shouting, a lot of anger, a lot of depression, and it's a very low energy. And people are immersed in anger, in depression, in jealousy, in hunger, in addiction. So what often happens to people who are stuck in that state is they will be pulled right into a lower vibration and can remain there for a long time. It's a real problem. There are a lot of earthbound spirits, and it is definitely a problem. I think for people who don't believe in life after death, for people who are addicted, some people don't want to leave. They want to stay in their house. They have family. They feel very connected to the earth. They don't want to go. So it's a real problem. And sometimes people are so ashamed of what they've done, they don't think they deserve to go to the heavenly realms. And I can tell you, you do. We're all really wonderful people. There's no reason to worry. I would not worry about this at all. But there are people who don't believe in life after death, and when they pass away, they assume they're alive, and they don't quite realize why no one can see them. This is a problem. And there are, hostile entities on the other side. And I'll get into that a little bit. One thing you can do is travel into the past and see the future. Often I'd come back from my astral explorations and I would have visions of the future, and they would come true the next day. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But I also wanted to go to the past because I heard you can do this. And one thing, I wanted to see was the wreck of the Titanic. I was obsessed with the Titanic long before the movie came out with Leonardo and Kate Winslet. And I really wanted to see it. And I popped out of body once and I ended up in that weird foggy place. And I'm like, take me to the Titanic. And it's taking forever. And I can feel all this energy. And I'm like, well, gosh, I can feel my consciousness running out. I know I only have a few minutes left and it's counting down. Finally, I have like 1 minute left. And I'm getting very curious what's below this foggy realm below me. And so I finally just dived down to see what it was. And it wasn't the Titanic. I didn't have the patience to get there or the ability. But what I saw was a antediluvian prehistoric jungle. And I'm like, wow, this is strange. Where am I? I'm looking at the plants and they're huge. It looks prehistoric. And I'm thinking this is early Earth. Maybe I got lost. I don't know where I am. And suddenly I saw a lion. And it was about 20 feet away from me, crouched in a pouncing position. And it jumped up and it bit me around the throat. And I'm like, it scared the living daylights out of me. And I pulled immediately back into my body and I realized, that's a past life. That was a past life. Sometimes that's what happens. You're pulled into a past life. I heard about people rescuing a lost soul. I did this. I found a little girl who had apparently been murdered. Took a while, but I convinced her, like, do you want to see your mommy? And I carried her over to the other side. There are hostile entities occasionally. Usually that will just pull you right back into your body. But sometimes I've encountered them. What I usually do is just fly back to my body. I did find ghosts in my house. I had a few mediums tell me, your house is haunted. I'm like, no. Though I did have lights going on and off a few times. And I cleared my house. So that's easy to do. Often you can explore past lives. I went to a very high plane, the Akashic Library it's called. And I saw all my past lives. My mom was there. It was the most amazing experience. Everything negative in you is filtered away when you get to the Akashic realm. Also visited a healing temple. It looked very much like this, but it was dark. Went inside and it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I couldn't sustain it. It was so beautiful. But I came back feeling great. I basked in the light, as is described by near-death experiencers. This is like visiting God. It really is. It's like nirvana. There's nothing so wonderful as basking in the light. I saw a gray alien once on the other side. That was interesting. Here's my dad's friend, Mike. Once I was at work when I got really depressed and I just suddenly knew that somebody had died. It was him. Doing this will wake up your psychic powers to an incredible degree. I've had many, many instances of clairvoyance, precognitive dreams, and all kinds of things. Learned about past lives. You can visit your spirit guides. There's nothing you can't do on the other side. It is absolutely wonderful. I can't recommend it enough. It's as safe as sleeping. Anybody can do it. You're already doing it. And here's the book I wrote on my experiences. I've talked about many that are not in this book, but many of them are. So yeah, thanks for letting me talk about my out-of-body experiences. If you don't believe me, try it yourself. I encourage you to. You're doing it anyway, and it will make your transition to the other side much easier. Stopped sharing my screen. So yeah, happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
Do you think that is there a relationship between your UFO contacts and this ability now to travel astrally? Do you see them astrally?
There's a minor connection. I think what happens often when someone has a UFO experience is it wakes you up. And people who are having encounters, if you see a UFO, it's like a mini revelation, a mini enlightenment, and it makes you question things. I don't think there's a direct relationship in my case, but some people who have full-on onboard experiences, it wakes them up psychically. For me, I think it was doing these exercises. It was the death of my mother. I think she did it. It was my own quest to find out if there's life after death that ultimately led me to having these experiences.
Okay, so the UFO is more of a psychic experience.
No, I would say a UFO is a very physical experience, but there's a very strong spiritual element to it. The ETs are very advanced, not only technologically, but spiritually. And many people who have UFO experiences have a spiritual enlightenment. So that would be the connection.
Gotcha.
All right. I see a question from Bruce.
What I was wondering, and my question was, do you think that we have a large portion of our brain that we don't use, and perhaps repeated head injuries can awaken brain cells that can take you to a higher functioning of thinking and awareness?
I'm going to say yes. I'm not certainly recommending anyone bang themselves on the head, but there are a number of cases where people have had a head injury and suddenly start playing virtuoso piano, or suddenly have the ability to speak another language even. It can wake you up in a weird way. And this is sort of connecting to past lives. That can happen. Yeah, that can happen for sure. But when you do these experiences, you start to activate your brain in a much bigger way. The brain is not the mind. The brain is a physical organ that allows you to connect to the mind. So people say who have a stroke and can't speak or can't move or have disabilities, they don't. You will not lose your memories ever. Everything that's ever happened to you is recorded forever on the other side. Everything all your physical objects too, anything you lost in a flood, don't worry. There's a place you can go, and it's there on the other side. The other side is the superior world. The astral body doesn't age. So absolutely, I think we are only using a small portion of our brain, but actually the mind is what it's all about, and the brain is just a tool.
As far as telepathy goes, how do you know when you have it, and how do you know that it's real?
Yeah,
and not something you're.
Yeah. Telepathy is very tricky. Telepathy is a natural human talent, and it's been proven in a laboratory setting. This is something that's actually been proven. We are all telepathic, and on a subconscious or perhaps superconscious level, we are all telepathic. There'll be times when I go out of body and visit people, and I talk to them, and they are answering me with their subconscious. We're talking, and they're not aware of it. We are all connected together in ways that we don't realize. And sometimes you'll have psychic impressions, and this is why, because you are connected to everyone, especially loved ones. I will come back from out-of-body experience, and you can, to a certain extent, read a person's mind. It's crazy. So telepathy is real. We all experience it, and I think we experience it when we don't even know it. You can be in a bad mood and you're wondering why. It's because you're surrounded by negative energies. This is one of the reasons for mob mentality. And, the whole crowd starts vibrating at the same level, like at a concert or at a party, of high vibration. You feel much better because you're connecting to people. And so it can be very difficult sometimes. Like, is this my thought? It's very, very, very important to pay close attention to every thought you have. At all times, you should be aware of your inner world, and this will sort of wake you up to what's going on with you. If you're having any kind of difficulties with depression, sort this out and look at your thoughts and ask yourself, is this thought coming from me, or is this coming from someone else? Telepathy can be very apparent because you will hear a voice in your head. And it can be very subtle. I was once watching The Long Island Medium with Teresa Caputo, and suddenly I heard a really subtle voice. It wasn't out loud. It was just a sort of message, which said, "There is a message in this reading for you. In this next reading, there's a message for you." And I thought, wow, did I just hear that? Am I making that up? Did someone just talk to me? And so I paid close attention to the next reading, and Teresa Caputo says to her client, "Does the date October 13th mean anything to you?" And I started crying because that's the day my mom died. And so, yeah, telepathy can be very subtle. It can be a voice out loud. You might hear like, you should stop smoking, or watch out. And then something will happen. That's telepathy. We all have spirit guides. Our loved ones are not far, far away from us. They are right there watching over us. The heavenly realms are not in some faraway distant place. They are right next to Earth in the same actual physical space, just at a higher vibration. Your astral body isn't far away. You have an astral body within your physical body. So it's all real close to us. And telepathy is real. It's just a matter of sort of meditating. Meditate, meditate, meditate. That would be my advice to anyone, and it will wake you up.
Thank you. One other question. Do you have the ability to know and recognize when somebody is gifted in that way?
Sometimes, absolutely. Sometimes, I didn't have any psychic. Well, I had one psychic experience growing up. I was 9 years old, and a game show came on, and I knew all the answers to it. Every single answer, I knew it. And me and my sister were just rolling on the floor. We thought it was the funniest thing. She remembers it. But doing these experiences will wake you up psychically, and you can start to see auras. You start to have clairvoyance. And yeah, I will walk up to people and I will sometimes see just a brightness around them. And I'm looking at them. I'm like, have you had psychic experiences? Like, yeah. You can kind of tell because there's a sparkle in their eyes. But all people are psychic. And doing this work really connects you to other people, and it brings you to a love vibration. The power of love is paramount. It will change everything. And yeah, you can absolutely tell when someone is psychic because they have a sort of aura around them.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Beth. I had an experience once, and I want to know whether you think it was an out-of-body experience or something else. I had been ill, so I wasn't feeling well, but I was asleep at night, and all of a sudden I woke up, and I had this sensation that I had this like sound of like a strong wind, and it felt like the covers were raised above me all of a sudden, and then of course I got scared and my heart started beating really fast. But was that somewhat of an experience like that, do you think?
Yes, I do. That's something you often feel when you're going out of body. It can be very loud. You might hear rustling. You might hear the roar of a jet engine, crackling, popping, voices even. And sometimes you'll have sensations of movement or heaviness, lightness, vertigo, stretching, numbness. You might have extreme thirst or hunger. So yeah, have you ever been lying in bed when suddenly you jerk or that sort of thing?
Sometimes when I'm first falling asleep, I've had that happen.
Yeah, that's you leaving your body and often, or coming back even. So that is definitely a sign that you're real close to being able to do this. Anyone can do this, by the way. It's just a matter of what I would do is just get a dream book, write down your dreams, increase your dream recall. Another thing you can do, a really good method, and this is a great secret I'm going to share with you, and one of the best ways to learn how to do this is to ask yourself right now, am I out of body? And I know you're not, when you're awake, but you have to ask yourself truly throughout the day, once or twice a day, but the more often, the better. Could I possibly be out of body right now? Could this be a dream? Could I be dreaming right now? And actually test reality. And by that, I mean, take a ball or a pen and hold it up and see if it drops, or throw a ball up into the air and see if it floats, or perhaps pull on your finger and see if it stretches, or put your finger through the wall and see if it goes into the wall. Do reality testing. That's what this is called. And it sounds ridiculous because you know you're awake. But what will happen is you will do this throughout the day and you're like, what am I doing? No, this is ridiculous. I know I'm awake. But suddenly you'll be at work one day and you're like, I'm going to test reality. And you'll take your pen and you'll hold it up and then suddenly it's floating. Your pen is, and you're like, oh, I'm out of body. And your work environment disappears, because sometimes we often go to work when we're asleep and just kind of act out what we're doing, and you'll be floating above your bed. It's the craziest thing. It's such an amazing event. So
I do remember once when I was in my late teens, floating around the ceiling in my bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's very common. Flying dreams, I'm telling you. This is something we're all doing. You may have had dreams about deceased loved ones. That's one of the easiest ways to do astral travel. I call it the love bridge. If you're kind of nervous about this, but you'd like to meet your loved ones, go to bed. And as you're lying there in bed, meditate on them. Call out to them. Tell that person, say their name. Remember what their voice is like. Remember what they looked like. Remember what it's like to touch them. Call to them and say, I would like to see you tonight. And just do that for 5, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and let it go. Don't overly cling to it. Just do that exercise and let go, and you will have an experience, very much. I mean, a full-on out-of-body experience in some cases, depending on, if you're ready to raise your consciousness to that level. It's a very easy way to have an out-of-body experience, because you don't have to deal with the uncomfortable, sometimes, sensations of leaving your body, because it can feel strange. And often, I'll just wake up out of body, especially in the beginning. Now I've gotten to the point where I can't do it at will, but I'm getting close. One time I just laid down in my bed and I felt the vibrations, and I wasn't asleep at all. I wasn't even close. My eyes were open. I'm like, all right, let's do this. And it was the first time I actually floated out, went out of body with my eyes still open. So that was fun. One time I was curious about, am I dressed out of body? Am I, in my pajamas? I sleep in my underwear, actually. And I was wondering about that, because I didn't want to appear to someone, inappropriately. And I looked down and I'm like, nope, I was dressed in my work shirt, the shirt I take to work. I had my shoes on, and I'm like, wow. And I've inspected my body on the other side. All my hair comes back. You're pretty much normal. You're just much younger. But if you inspect your body for too long, it will just fade away and you turn into this little ball of consciousness, a little ball of light. And because the human body is sort of an illusion. We're really just an entity, a sort of a spark of consciousness. We're an indivisible part of the universe. This is what's so wonderful about this. You realize you are a part of the universe. There's no reason to fear anything. You cannot be hurt. Earth is a school. It's a place we go to learn loss, to learn pain, to learn love, to learn compassion, to learn things you cannot learn on the other side. This is a tough school. And kudos to every single one of you and anyone on Earth, because once you graduate from the Earth school, you're very well respected on the other side. And there's a long waiting list to get here.
Thank you.
Hi, Lori.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I just had a thought. You had, when you talked about the Christian view of hell and wondering if that existed, and said it does, but it's also self-created, but also kind of implied that the lower realms are real. Wouldn't that be only if they exist in your belief system?
I think you're right. I'm honestly not entirely sure. I am not nearly as good at this as some people are. I'm not sure if there's what I would call a consensus, like the heavenly realms, or what I would consider a consensus reality. They're real. Heavenly realms are real. So there could be a place on the other side that is absolutely sort of objectively real, and you can pull yourself there. Or it can be self-created. I'm not entirely sure. but I do know that there are lower realms, and it's a real problem. And if you go out of body regularly, at some point you're going to be rescuing lost souls for sure.
Huh, interesting. Thank you.
Hi, this is Dawn. I have a question. So what about reincarnation? Do people reincarnate and come back to Earth? And if so, when they're on the other side, which person are they?
Yeah, this is a very interesting subject to me, and it's kind of hard to figure out because I feel like, I'm me. I don't want to be someone else. What do you mean? I go away? I'm no longer Preston anymore? So I haven't quite figured it out, but there are past lives. And what happens is personality persists from life to life, and you can take on a different name, a different identity, but you are still yourself. And at some point you will remember this. And when you go out of body, it's a big thing. You will remember past lives. And what often happens is you're taken to a past life. You can do this intentionally, or it happens by accident. I've remembered myself as a Native American, as an escaped slave. I was in the Holocaust. I was raped and murdered. Often you're taken to the most traumatic scene in that life, the one that you're still holding trauma from, and that often includes the death scene. So it can be a little disconcerting, but it's not always. Sometimes it's a really emotional scene. Like for the Native American lifetime, it was a spirit quest that I was taken to. But past lives are a real thing. As near as I went to the Akashic Library, and they told me this. They showed me all my past lives, and there was a lot of them, and we all have a lot of them. They're all occurring sort of concurrently, simultaneously. Time collapses on the other side. Time is a product of the physical plane. So what we're doing is we're coming down to Earth and experiencing a wide variety of lives. So we can experience every situation, every era, every sort of identity. And we come back as a much more fully rounded person with a lot of names. People change their own name throughout a lifetime. This is a Native American tradition. They will go through a life-changing event and they will change their name. That's very much what a reincarnation is like. People who die usually wait a while. They wait till all their family group has come back. And then they go to a little committee and they're like, what do I need to learn? They plan out their lifetime. Some people have easy lifetimes because they just want to relax. Some go for sports. Some go to teach. Some go to, do healing. Most people are here for philanthropic reasons, to learn and to help others. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Jerry,
Hi.
you want to?
Yeah, I wanted to have a silly question, maybe. If you can conjure up who you want to speak to and different places, different times, is there any reason why you can't speak to the wisest people who ever lived, like Jesus or Moses or Einstein, and find out what we can do to save the earth or stop evil? And how can we get wisdom from the beyond?
Yeah, I've tried this a couple of times. I have called on Jesus, and I guess he was busy, or I'm not worthy yet. I tried that. I did call on God, and a beam of energy struck me and pulled me through the ceiling. And I lost consciousness, and I woke up in the best mood I've ever been in my life. I felt glorious. It brings tears to my eyes thinking about it.
I guess he kissed you.
Yeah, it was awesome. And I have looked for like famous people, and I have not really had much success with that. Others have. Someone met Emily Dickinson. So there are accounts of that. One thing I did do is I want to meet an enlightened master, someone who's really wise. I would love to meet an enlightened master. And I've done that a couple of times. One was I accidentally just came upon this lady who I felt was enlightened. I said, what can I do to heal myself? And she said, you must climb into your crown. And what she meant was activating your chakras. There's a crown chakra. And as you meditate, these various chakras will become activated. But another time was in my living room. I said, I want to meet an enlightened master. I want to meet someone who's truly, truly enlightened. And this beautiful woman appeared in my living room. She looked like Daryl Hannah, sort of, but wearing this sparkly gown. And she had just a beautiful lady. And she grabbed my arm and she pulled me out onto my balcony and said, okay, keep your eyes open. All right, keep your eyes open. And she jerked me upward really fast, so fast I was startled. I closed my eyes and instantly opened them because of what she said. And I was being deposited into the heavenly realms, and she was flying away. And in front of me was this old man sitting on a wooden chair, floating about 3 inches above the ground. And I'm like, wow. I could see he radiated wisdom. And I did not feel worthy. I fell to my knees and I'm kind of crying a little bit. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so nice to meet you. And he looked at me and he wasn't emotional. He wasn't like super warm and fuzzy, but he was very wise. And he looked at me and he spoke out loud, punctuating each word. And he gave me a weird message. This is what they sometimes do. They'll give you like a little riddle or a cone. I guess you might call it a Japanese cone, Koan. Sort of a message that you have to unravel. And he said very slowly, when you do something, do it absolutely. I'm like, well, what the heck does that mean? That's what I'm thinking. And a tunnel appeared and sucked me back to my house. And I have it here somewhere, what that message means. Shoot. Oh, there it is. I wrote this down so I don't forget it because I studied it. When you do something, do it absolutely. It was a weird sentence, structured kind of strangely. And what absolutely means is without attachment, without condition, without limitation, completely, positively. And this is a huge spiritual piece of wisdom. Don't become attached to things. Don't do things with condition. Don't limit yourself. And when you do it, don't do it, halfway. Do it completely. And always maintain a positive attitude, the power of positive thinking. So in one sentence, he gave a list of very deep spiritual aphorisms that actually took me a month to unravel. But it was so cool. And I think it was a really good piece of wisdom. And I've been following it ever since. Whenever I do something, I do it without expectation, without attachment, without limitation. And you can get a lot more done if you don't limit yourself. You'd be surprised how people are self-sabotaging. I can't do it. I can't do it. Yes, you can. You can do anything. Anything you want, you can do it. Don't worry if you miss the boat. You're an infinite, immortal being with all the power of the universe within you. So don't limit yourself and do it positively.
So do you feel that your purpose this lifetime is to pass information about the astral world and encourage people to try to reach a higher level?
Yes, I kind of knew that from a young age, that I was going to be a writer, and that I was going to be educating and teaching, but I wasn't quite sure what it was about. But I knew from an early age that I was going to do this. But when I started having really spiritual experiences and UFO experiences, I realized what my mission is. It's to wake people up to the fact that we are not alone in this universe. We are not mortals. We are immortals. And the universe is safe. And we have incredible abilities of clairvoyance, telepathy, precognition, levitation. We are superhumans. There's, healing. We can heal ourselves. I didn't get into that, but I found 20 cases of people who have healed themselves of sarcoidosis, liver disease, colds, cuts, arthritis, multiple sclerosis. You can actually heal yourself. One lady I know personally, she had a near-death experience. She had chronic cancer. The cancer disappeared. There are many, many accounts of people who've had a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience and come away from it healed, physically healed. So there are no real dangers, but there are an enormous number of benefits. You can heal yourself, you extend your lifespan, you have all these any experience you want to have, any wild desire, you can do it. So it's absolutely something I would encourage everyone to at least look into. Don't be afraid. The universe is absolutely safe. You can't be hurt when you're out of body. And the literature, I scoured it looking for negative encounters. The scariest thing is sometimes you meet hostile entities, lower earthbound spirits who don't wish you well, but that's easy to escape from. They can't hurt you. And all you have to do is fly back into your body, or push love at them. But yeah, it's something I think that is a very healing experience, and that's what the literature shows, that many, many wonderful things can happen.
Now, I hope someday they figure out how to allow religions to exist without hating each other and doing harm to each other.
Yeah, that's the true purpose of religion, is to connect you to the other side. It's a way to connect to God, to connect to each other. Jesus had it right. He said was absolutely beautiful. And he said, the things I can do, you will do, and more. And I think that's true. We are all enlightened beings. We just have to work our way up there.
I have two quick questions. This is my first time. This is my first meeting, and I've had my own experiences. And I was wondering if you're the last of a bloodline of your family. My family has been around since the 1700s, and before that, my great-great-grandfather 5 times over was Jeremiah Fletcher. He was at Valley Forge with George Washington. And I am the last male, and I don't have any children. And I'm wondering if being the last in the bloodline, so when I die, that the bloodline stops with me. And I'm wondering if there's any type of connection between telepathy and being the last one in the bloodline of the family.
That's a profound thing. I'm not sure I can speak to that with a whole lot of personal experience about bloodlines and the connection to telepathy. But what I can say is people do reincarnate within family bloodlines, and often we reincarnate with the same people over and over again. A relationship with a friend is often even closer than family. And you may say you're the last of a bloodline, but the truth is we're all very, very closely connected. And we all have relatives that we're not aware of because we came from a much smaller group of people. So we actually do have people that we are very, very genetically close to. So probably that's what will pull you into another place to reincarnate. You do have family members out there, because if you go back and do your genealogy, it branches out like a tree. And so that little branch you're on might be coming to an end, but the fact is there's another branch right next to it, right next to that, and you're very connected to that. So that's what I would say. And you are connected to all kinds of people. And there are people who you resonate with because they're on the same soul group. We all have like soul groups. Have you ever been walking around and you meet someone and you're like, immediately you like them. You're connected, or you recognize them. Sometimes you'll meet someone and you're like, oh, this person just rubs me the wrong way. Right. That can be a karmic connection. Karma is very real. We have lessons to learn. And sometimes we'll meet people are put in our path so we can work out an issue from a previous life. And people will, be brought back and to another life, and instead of having, their children are their parents, or their parents are their sisters or brothers. So we go through all these different relationships, including friends. Like my sister-in-law, I remember being a pirate with her. I remember being a priest with her. I remember all kinds of lifetimes with her. She's a very spiritual person. And my friend Roger, I remember being a priest with him. I was a priest in a number of my lifetimes. Once a bad priest. I was not a good guy back in the Middle Ages. But I think we all have very strong past life influence as well.
Thank you. I just have my last question is, if you are telepathically able to receive and send thoughts, can somebody influence your dreams at night and kind of like, stage your dreams?
Yes, but only if you allow it. Only if they're your level of spiritual, only if they are at your level of spiritual advancement. So there are negative entities. People have moved into haunted houses and had kind of bad dreams, and that can happen. But if you don't allow it, it won't. And this is the cause of some nightmares. People are being influenced. But generally what happens is you have spirit guides, and they're doing their darndest to help you, and they will stage dreams. They will give you ideas. They will give you inspiration. They will push people into pathways so that they meet. People often meet their partner this way, like, oh, it was the most incredible coincidence. How we met. It was an amazing synchronicity. I'm like, well, yeah, it was. But on the other side, you would see there's a whole dance going on. And yeah, dreams can be influenced, but generally it comes from very high level spirits who are trying to send messages to you and help teach you.
Thank you very much.
Here, I do see a question written. It says, if home is in the astral plane, then why would you say that we come to Earth? And which of your books addresses the astral plane? It's the one book, Out of Body Exploring. I am writing a sequel to it. And yes, the astral plane is our home, and we come to Earth to learn. And it's a tough, tough school. You cannot experience pain on the other side. You couldn't even describe it to a person. Or isolation, individuality is something that's very prominent here. And it's on the other side, it's a different thing. You are very connected. You're not lonely on the other side. Loneliness is a product of the Earth plane, and it's something that's a very, very valuable learning experience. There's all kinds of things we can only learn here. And to come into Earth with like no memories is a big deal. And you get to learn sort of what level you're at and how you would react to certain situations. Earth is a school. And I think this is something that's echoed by many, many spiritual teachers. And it's a great school. It's a very difficult school. I'm looking forward to graduating. At some point, we are going to leave the Earth school and go on to upper, higher places. And don't worry about it. People are like, oh, there's things I don't want to leave here. I like being physical. Oh, you'll love the other side even better. Everything that you experience here, you can experience there with a greater sensitivity, more depth, and more opportunities. But yeah, Earth is not our true home. Our true home is the astral realm and really the highest levels. We all go to the very highest levels on a nightly basis. Again, the trick is remembering. Just try to remember your dreams, meditate, and it will open you up and you'll become a whole individual. We're very compartmentalized in our consciousness. You don't have to have a subconscious. You can become super conscious. And this is how mediums do it. This is how psychic reading works.
Oh, yeah.
So you just want to sort of slowly elevate your consciousness, raise your vibration, guide every decision using love and truth, love and knowledge, and we'll be just fine.
Thank you so much, Preston. Thank you for all your patience with us and your messages. It's been great. Read his books. There's tons of them, and they're really first-person stuff. You'll enjoy it. So that's it. We're done.